All right, so welcome everybody. The Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery was a special appropriation appropriated for certain presidentially declared disasters in December of 2024. On January 21st, 2025, Guam received notice and a universal notice was published and an allocation amount was provided for Guam. The Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery requires that each activity, program, project uh, meets three criteria. One, that it address a direct or indirect impact from Typhoon Mawar, which is the disaster. Two, be a CDBG eligible activity or be eligible under a waiver or alternative requirement. And three, it must meet a national objective for activities except certain mitigation activities. So where are we? I want to stress that we are in the beginning of this grant. GURA is currently conducting an unmet needs assessment, and we're moving towards developing an action plan. The unmet needs assessment helps us gain feedback from the public and stakeholders into unmet needs resulting from Typhoon Mawar so that we can develop that into an action plan and develop potential programs and projects to help the community recover. It's important to note the action plan can be amended as many times as necessary. It's anticipated that states, which includes Guam, amend their action plan as new needs and information come forward. It's not uncommon for a jurisdiction to amend their action plan 5 times. Some jurisdictions may amend them even up to 25 times. There are three national objectives under the Housing Community Development Act, Title I. First national objective is the elimination of slum and blight. It can be done in a couple different ways. Area basis could be a designated area. Spot could be a specific building. Urban renewal are much more substantial projects. And a couple of examples that GURA has done in the past of urban renewal projects is the Central Village of Sinahanya, Central Village of Zotnya, and Central Village of Asen. The other national objective are urgent need. It's seldom used, but it's kind of like a catch-all. It does require very specific criteria. Oftentimes, it is not approved by HUD, but it is an option if necessary. The main thing we're going to be discussing is the national objective for activities, projects, and programs that benefit low to moderate income persons, otherwise known as LMI. We will be speaking a lot about LMI. Just as a general reference, and it depends on the family size, LMI would be a gross household income of a family of four, making about 75,000 or less per year. This can be determined a couple different ways. One, that the project, program, or activity have an area benefit that benefits LMI. Two, it services limited clientele. Three, it's a housing activity that supports LMI people. Or four, job creation and retention activities for low to moderate income people. So the main takeaway is that we're required to utilize 70% of the grant funding and that it must benefit and be eligible under one of the LMI objectives. And again, to remind everybody, this is just the beginning. We have here a breakdown of how the money is going to be not necessarily spent, but how it's going to be broken down based on requirements from the federal government. The total allocation of Guam is 500,825,000. Of that, 5% is set aside for administrative costs. That's going to cover our required audits, public information, any fair housing requirements, other indirect costs, contracted services, the general management, oversight, and coordination of this grant. It covers a 6 year period, up to 6 years for the program, an additional 2 years for grant closeout if necessary. For a 6 year period, it's approximately 0.83% a year, so less than 1% a year for the administration. The other thing that we need to set aside is 15% for planning. This covers any environmental assessments, analysis, complex studies, simple studies, community development plans, other policy and management plans that we would need to undertake. Available for award at this time is $410,785,375. The other hard requirement from Congress and HUD is that we spend a minimum of $52,260,000 on mitigation activities. These are activities that don't need to be related to Typhoon Mawar, either directly or indirectly. However, it does need to be indicated on the mitigation needs assessment, which either stakeholders or the public provide comment that there is a mitigation need and that it is on the state hazard mitigation plan, or that the state intends to put it on the hazard mitigation plan. The holder of the state hazard mitigation plan is the Office of Civil Defense, and and so we will be looking to them for project development and proposals as far as mitigation activities go. The largest pot is the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, which is in the amount of $358,525,375. There are two HUD requirements and one primary priority requirement for GURA. The two requirements are one, that it's on the unmet needs assessment, meaning there are public or stakeholder comments that support or provide or make comment that there is an unmet need within the community. Two, that it either be directly or indirectly related to Typhoon Mawar. Three, which is GURA's requirement, is our priority to focus first on projects, programs, and activities that benefit low to moderate income persons. That's in direct relation to a very hard requirement from HUD and Congress, in that, as we previously mentioned, 70%, which is $287,549,763, is utilized or spent on programs, projects, and activities that directly benefit low to moderate income folks in one of those four ways we provided. Other national objectives could be met without LMI up to 123,235,612. So there's many things we can do with this grant, and in order to really make sure we have many good comments that come in, we like to be very upfront of what is prohibited, what the money cannot be spent on. The first one being buildings or portions thereof used in the general conduct of government. The exception for disaster recovery is that it is allowed for a non-federal match. So it can cover the non-federal matching portion of any other grant that may be out there. An example of this is GURA's built many police stations and fire stations throughout the throughout the island. As you may know or may not be aware, the headquarters of GPD, headquarters of GFD are in a whole different building. And that's because we can't fund the administration spaces or general operation spaces of a government building or any building that is. Um, the funding that when it goes to a building has to go to the area that is providing the direct service. The other thing it cannot be spent on, general government operations. So um, different from ARP, it can't go to the budget expenses of another agency. Three, it cannot be used for political activities. That goes for equipment, donations, lobbying, signs, and others. Next is the purchase of equipment is generally ineligible. The rule of thumb is that if it's movable, it is not eligible under equipment. There are very limited circumstances that allow for it. It's really on a case-by-case basis, but generally, if it's movable, it's not eligible. Operating and maintenance expenses are also generally ineligible. Specific exemptions can exist for temporary support for public services and interim assistance. And lastly, income payments are prohibited. Those include individual stimulus checks and payments, as well as individual business stimulus payments on the economic side. So what's next and what's ongoing? My apologies. We're out here talking. We have many meetings set up with stakeholders of various organizations, nonprofits, um, as well as government entities as stakeholders. And we're also soliciting comments and input from the public relative to unmet needs from Typhoon Mawar. Again, as I've stipulated, the comments and inputs will be used to develop our unmet needs assessment that will help us inform GURA on the priority needs for Guam, and it's going to drive the budget that's going to be allocated in the action plan. The unmet needs assessment is going to consider existing needs and new needs that we may not recognize, or it's not recognized by other programs or funding sources. And we do consider community-wide needs as well as individual needs. When we draft the action plan and send that in, it's broken down and funding is budgeted towards three primary categories. The first one is housing. The second one is infrastructure, which includes public facilities. And the third one is economic revitalization. Once we've published or drafted the action plan, we will publish that for stakeholder and public input for a 30-day period. We're planning right now for another hearing during the public comment period. We will consider public comments and make summary replies and also make any adjustments to the draft action plan as necessary, which it could include inclusion in that action plan or towards budget allocation for different project categories. Once we've completed the 30-day public comment period and made adjustments to the action plan, we'll transmit it to HUD. Our target date for that right now is May 15th. HUD will analyze the proposed action plan against federal data and other data we provide, our unmet needs assessments, and approve or require amendments to that action plan within 45 days. So that puts us a little bit about the end of June. What we want to be very transparent on how we will be evaluating priorities, which also include prioritizing projects ultimately. We ask at least 7 questions. One, does the proposed project or activity meet post-disaster unmet needs? Primarily, is it mentioned on any of the unmet needs assessment? Does the data support it? Two, is the project sustainable, right? We can build a building, but we need to make sure that it's going to be open and that it can actually be put into operation. Three, is the project feasible? Is it something that's allowed under the law? Is it something that meets the environmental regulations ultimately? The other question along that same primary question is it something within the budget? Four, can the project be executed in a timely manner? We have 6 years to expend the funds. That's the end of the program cycle for this grant. HUD will be doing checks to make sure that those projects are moving along. The other question to that is, does the time frame of the project program or activity further our overall recovery? Does it meet our recovery vision? Questions 5 and 6 kind of are similar enough. They fall in the same category. But the simplest way to explain it is these are multipliers. Is the proposed project, program, or activity a multiplier? General rule of thumb is if it takes a 20% investment, but you have 80% impact, those projects are weighted much higher. Another way that it could also be considered a multiplier is, as an example, there's leveraging of funding. So if let's say there's funding 80% out there for a project, but they just need the remaining 20%, that's considered a multiplier. New infrastructure into areas that could stimulate economic activity, housing, construction, those are considered multipliers. And then weighing it, I think there have been examples in public hearings and in some of the public hearings we've had in the past where homeowner rehabilitation, for example, there are families who have not been able to back into their homes because all they need is their roof replaced and windows replaced, right? Those are a smaller investment for a bigger impact because now you have a displaced person or homeless person rehoused versus building a brand new house at 3 to 4 times the cost. So those are how we analyze and look at the projects and make our justifications. The seventh one we haven't really considered at this point and seen anything where this would really be applicable to Guam, but it is something we're going to be mindful of. Does the project or program exacerbate pre-existing disaster market vulnerabilities, or does it recreate existing problems? One example of this would be a jurisdiction that has 200 people and 1,000 houses, and they have no real estate market, and you have so many vacant houses, they're falling apart, they're not being maintained. And if a storm were to come along and blow all those houses away, is it feasible or a priority to rebuild all the 100 houses and recreate the problem that was there before? And lastly, to reprioritize um, that low to moderate income projects and programs will be the first to be prioritized. And before I open it up for any questions and answers that we can provide or people asking for clarification, we're requesting that input be provided in writing so that we can catalog it and have an evaluation, categorize it. Public comments can be placed also in Gura's Dropbox at our physical location at 117 Bienvenida Avenue in Sinajana, next to the Sinajana Mayor's office, or for your convenience by email at fixin6@guamdr.org. And we have the QR code. You can stay up to date on all updates and changes and also, just to stay up to date on projects that we're going to be having and moving forward at GuamCDBG-DR.org. And so, with that, I will go ahead and conclude my presentation and open it up to questions. One moment. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you if you just use the little emote button on the Zoom, and so we can go ahead and take your questions. Okay, no questions out there in the audience? Right. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Just gonna go ahead and put it out there again. Does anyone have any questions or comments or would like clarification on anything? Because if not, we'll go ahead and close out the this presentation. Oh, thank you, Ken. Actually, the public comment is going to be continuous, but the by the end of the public comment period, so when we announce the public comment period, the start date and close date, that doesn't mean that we're not accepting public comments. That's just going to set a point in time in which we will take the comments at that time for this initial action plan. As I mentioned earlier, we can update the action plan as needed, so we'll always be taking comments to consider. So the public comments right now could be put in at any time for this initial draft of the action plan that or this initial action plan. We will have an end date that we will publish at the public notice, and we'll be putting out articles and press releases on that, ads in the newspaper on the start date of the official public comment period and the end of the public comment period, which includes stakeholders. But for now, it's already open You don't need to wait for the opening of the public comment. You can go ahead and send it in so we can start taking that into consideration and incorporating it. Does that answer your question, sir? Thank you. All right. Any other questions out there? Is the public invited to submit specific proposals? You can, absolutely. Any comment, public comment, however they're submitted, will take. It can be as detailed as you'd like, or as simple as, comment coming in, we need help with homeowner rehab, or we need more housing. And we'll take those and consider how best to do that. Thank you for your question, Mr. Ryan. Any other questions out there? Actually, before I go back, just so I make sure I understand the question correctly, or I can expand on the question. So we are still in phase one of the grant, right? This is just general public comments. This is general scoping. When the time comes for applications, which will be in phase three, we're hoping for the fall. What we're going to do is, depending on the object category, it could be for housing, could be for infrastructure, public facilities, and could be for economic revitalization. We will open up an application period, just like we do with our regular CDBG. That's where the actual proposals come in. Specific proposals are not addressed in the action plan. This is really big budget to start, kind of determining, 300 million to housing, 100 million to public infrastructure, 50 million to economic revitalization. That's all that this is. There may be some subcategories, but the specific program design comes in phase three, and we will do application periods. We'll open that up. We'll provide notice for people to apply, and we also intend to do a couple of technical assistances with potential applicants, with interested applicants. So thank you for that question. Are there any other questions out there in the audience? All right. So I guess then with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. I'll stay behind on the Zoom room. I'll stop the recording, stay behind on the Zoom room for a little bit in case anybody wanted to, had some, they had a thought, afterthought. So with that, thank you everybody. Si Diyos Masi. I'd like if the executive director Napoli can give some closing remarks.
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. Yes, I think maybe just a reminder that we do have the website that's dedicated just to the CDBG-DR program that will have updates. And I think we'll have contact information for any questions that you may have, because public input is really important. If we need to find out what the unmet needs are that people are wanting to have addressed, then we need that feedback from everyone. So please do not hesitate to access our website or contact our office and or send emails in, and we will, archive those, and it will help us in coming up with a proposed action plan to expend these funds. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time this evening and listening to the presentation on this very important program. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Deputy Director.
Thank you, Ms. Liz. Thank you, everybody.